welcome panelists. I'd love you to introduce yourselves and tell us what you do and what brought you here today.
All right, good morning, everyone. My name is Michelle Alladin. I work at Regeneron. I lead a US marketing team in the gastroenterology business for a drug called Dupixent.
Good morning. I'm Cynthia Accuosti Jones from Johnson & Johnson and have the pleasure of leading our lung cancer sales and marketing teams in our commercial businesses. Thank you for having us today.
Hello, everyone. Rodney, Gillespie. Good morning to you. Good to see everybody. I work for Novartis, and I have the pleasure of leading our oncology business for the U.S.
Thank you. And as Walt said earlier, I think for us, especially living and breathing healthcare, this to me is one of the most important conversations we are having throughout this conference, especially a conference filled with culture. And we talk about culture all the time and what that looks like. But in healthcare, you talk about the various disparities that our community sees day in and day out. And it's frightening, almost every single disease state and how that affects us. And I think we have the privilege as healthcare marketers to make sure that our community specifically are getting that life-saving message. And as we get into the conversation, wanted to read a few things. Iron Man, 2008. The Incredible Hulk, 2008. Iron Man 2, 2010. Thor, 2011. Captain America, 2011. The Avengers, 2012. Iron Man 3, 2013, Thor, 2013, Captain America, Winter Soldier, Guardians of the Galaxy, Avengers, Ant-Man, Captain America, Civil War, 2016, Doctor Strange, 2016, Guardians of the Galaxy 2, 2017, Spider-Man, 2017, Thor Ragnarok, 2017. 17 movies, 10 years spanned before we saw our first Marvel superhero being a person of color in Black Panther and Spider-Man to the Spider-Verse with Thor, or Into the Spider-Verse rather, with Miles Morales. And you might ask, what does that have to do with healthcare? At that moment, I was teaching Sunday school for my church. And a friend of mine in Sunday school, one of my good friends, Rodney, his son was in the class, Eli, and Eli came to class in full Spider-Man getup. And I didn't understand it. Rodney, what's your son? Why is he dressed as Spider-Man? And I'll never forget what he said. And that was before I had kids, and so it hit me different now. But at the time, he said, Egg, that was the first time he saw somebody that looked like him as a superhero, and he couldn't fathom it. And we watch it all the time now because of him. And in media, at the time I was working in media, obviously, and it was so profound to me because the images that truly our kids see, in real life, in real time, I was able to see how that impacts people being able to see and emulate themselves on television. So for me, that was a seminal moment in my career, in my life, as to why this is extremely important for me and a life mission of mine to make sure our next generation can continue to see themselves on the messages and things that we're able to put out as professionals. And so with that, I will kick it over to my panelists to tell us what is your origin story? What brings you here today? Why is this passionate for you?
Yeah, so I'll start. So I've been in the industry for 20 years. I started at Pfizer, worked there for 16 years, and now at Regeneron for 4. But I got introduced to healthcare very early in life. My mother lived and passed away from breast cancer, but that exposed me to hospitals, to doctors, to nurses. And so I always had a curiosity and that question, why can't they do more, right? And I still ask that question today to my team, why can't we do more, right? I ask that to my family, my husband who's here. I'm like, why can't we do more, right? Like I'm always asking that question, and that curiosity, I think, has carried me through my marketing career. And I ask that question specifically to this topic, why can't we do more for diverse populations who need more education, who need better care, who need better access, who need better pictures of themselves to see in terms of inspiration on how to live a healthier life. And so for me, just that journey over time and just keeping that question top of mind, why can't we do more? And then now being in a position where I feel like I can help do more, that's kind of what brought me here today. So I'm really excited to hear from the other panelists as well, but that's my journey in the healthcare space, but specifically, I'm ready to do more.
Thanks, Eg. So I'm also 20 years in the industry, but my career started and my background was actually in finance. And I distinctly remember one of the reasons that I decided to attend Georgetown University was because of the distinct differences between the environment and makeup of what that was like versus where I grew up in small town North Jersey, which did not have that much diversity, but more importantly, just the walks of life that people had come from. And so that always inspired me, and when I left school, even though I moved into finance, I quickly realized within the healthcare industry that I needed to know what was behind the numbers and actually wanted to be closer to impacting why we're doing what we're doing. And the external environment that we were operating in, it was very clear to me that if we're insular and only look down to what we're trying to achieve, we'll never connect with who's at the other side of it, which is actually the patient, the customers. And so I spent a good amount of my career in market access before moving into more traditional areas of marketing. And I distinctly remember, like you said, Michelle, situations when my grandmother is passing away and I'm sitting there saying, wow, I actually am privileged enough to have the education to understand healthcare and understand this industry, and I can't do more for her. I can't get her what she needs. And so things like that motivate me often because I believe we actually have to represent who we're trying to connect with, which I loved your analogy there, Eg, around Superman. So thank you.
Absolutely. Rod?
All right. I've been in this industry for longer than them. You know, I've actually been in this industry from day one when I graduated from college. And part of it is because I've always had a spirit of just wanting to give back in whatever way it could be, right? And, you know, I did that in high school, I did it in college, and then, you know, I continue to do it in my sort of personal life. And then my thought was, why not, you know, spend time in an area where you feel like you can make a difference and give back to our community? No area better than healthcare. And so, you know, very early on, when I started in this industry, you know, quick story as well. I started my career actually with J&J. Stayed there for a little bit before I left, but my family immediately thought I was a sales rep. They immediately thought I was like a doctor because my family would call me up and say, "Hey, I got this pink pill, and I got an ache. You think I could take that pill for?" I'm like, "Go to the doctor. I'm not a doctor." So, but the one thing I will say, though, is I was probably more educated in healthcare than all of my family. And so just being able to direct them and help them, you know, very specifically in terms of, no, go to the doctor. Don't try to, you know, take some pill you had sitting in the medicine cabinet for a year or two, you know, was actually, I think, really beneficial to giving back to your own family. And I've continued to grow in the field, whether it's in diabetes or in respiratory diseases and now in oncology. So that's a little bit of my story.
Absolutely, thank you. And Rodney, I'm going to start with you, being the big brother in the conversation. Do you feel the healthcare industry has been slow to adapting its marketing strategies to the growing diversity of the U.S. population?
I don't hesitate because the answer is actually really easy. The answer is yes. I just want to hesitate because I'm trying to figure out, where do I start? And we have been slow, and I was actually having a really good conversation. I think the reason we've been slow is because I look at, you know, I call it return on investment. That's one reason we've been slow, because we haven't quite put a number on, when you reach out to diverse populations, does it actually help your business? Because remember, healthcare, whether you're a pharma, hospital, pharmacy, everybody has to make a profit, right? So there's a little bit of that has gone into the equation. No one spent time. And then, quite honestly, I'll just talk about the pharma industry. The pharma industry hasn't been very diverse, right, period. And I'm saying diverse in terms of marketers or the people who are sitting in the rooms making decisions. And one really quick story, I was working on a team recently, so I would say my company I'm with now, and we were having a conversation about prostate cancer, and we were looking at initiatives in terms of how do we go out to the community. by the way, community just is broad term. But I noticed there were no initiatives going out to the diverse community, to the black community. And as some of you may know, for prostate cancer, black men die at 2 times the rate of our counterparts. And so the fact that we had 0 initiatives there told me something. But then when I looked at my team, there was no diverse people in the room. And so I brought the diversity, I brought the conversation, to the room, and then obviously we're doing some things different. But I think sometimes it takes, leaders, it takes people to be in the room and to bring up the conversation to get these type of things to come to the forefront. And, Cynthia and I work closely together, and I know Cynthia has brought that conversation to me. So it's not just black people in the room, but you need sort of allies and people that believe in reaching out to diverse audiences, because not because it is the right thing to do, by the way, but it's also a very good thing to do for business as well.
Yeah, I'll build on that, and I find it, it was funny when we were doing our introductions about where we came from. I felt compelled to actually, find a way to integrate the fact that Rodney and I did work together, because I don't know if I'd actually be here if it wasn't for Rodney in this capacity, in the sense that I was working under Rodney when George Floyd happened, and when we saw a pretty stark change and I think we would argue that maybe the pendulum has unfortunately swung back a bit from where we were after that, but in terms of the progress, but I think pharma is still committed to it. And part of what Rodney referenced was just conversations around, are we spending time in the right places? And part of the reason I feel that we have been slow is that we're just getting to the point now where I think we're understanding the data and the patient journey in a way we haven't before. Because the bias is masking the data, in the sense that if you look at who is getting access to your care, who ultimately the patient is, it is disproportionately not the diverse patient, because those patients are trying to battle through the bias in the system to get there. But if you dig underneath it and understand what Rodney talked about, right? Black men are dying at 2 times the rate. 1 in 6 black men will actually develop prostate cancer. It's 1 in 8 or 1 in 10 for the general population. So is it that they're not the patient, or is it that we haven't built the bridge to get those men to become the patient? And so I think access to data and really understanding that patient journey in terms of both the biology of the disease that sometimes disproportionately affects these populations, but also the fact that they haven't been accessing care, which biases our business case to begin with.
Michelle, for you, what do you feel, what immediate steps can we take as healthcare companies to start bridging these gaps that Cynthia was talking towards?
Yeah, I feel like there's so many, to your point of where do you begin, right? But I feel like once we get the messages out there to drive education, to drive and build connection points, we still have to make sure those messages are received. And so sometimes it's the venue, right? It's usually not the message. More often, it's the messenger. And I feel like we have to start using the right messenger. So even just in preparation for today, I was just kind of doing some research and like, okay, when have we, pharma, gotten it right and used the right messenger to kind of really drive home education or help patients better understand what they're living with or what their family members are living with? Came across 3 examples. So one, we're coming out of the Olympics. I don't know if you all saw the Simone Biles commercial with her mother, kind of highlighting and educating around diabetes and the treatment that she's taking. Another one, Serena Williams. This has actually been a hot topic lately for different reasons, but Serena Williams recently had a couple of commercials about the migraines that she suffers from and educating about how she's been able to persevere and push through that, and based on the medication she's taking. But the last example, I think, is actually one of the best examples of using the right medium to get the message out. And so Anthony Anderson, the actor who plays the dad Dre on the TV show Blackish, I'm sure we're all familiar. So he lives with diabetes himself and has had it for 20 plus years, and he openly shares his story. But what was really cool about that example was that he didn't just do a commercial. They wrote it into the script on Blackish. So if you remember, he was actually a part of a media agency in that show, and they were doing a pitch or getting business from Novartis, who makes a diabetes medication. And so literally in the episode, they're educating the viewers, whether they know it or not. They're learning about the symptoms and like the different treatment options and questions to talk to your doctor about, right? So shared decision making, so many elements, or they're just viewing it as part of an episode, but they're being educated. He took it a step further and then went to his social media platforms and did online videos, talked about it on Instagram. Took it a step further and started doing a speaking tour. And I think it got cut short because of COVID, but I use that example to say, how do we reach the masses? I think it really is through the right messenger. We are experts at getting the message right. We have to get it through the right person. So it could be received in the right way, and then patients, diverse populations can act on it and then seek treatment and then hopefully get on therapy. So if we can find the right messengers, I think the message will hit home.
That's amazing. And I know as I was having a chat with a few of y'all earlier, we were talking about not only getting the message out through the right messenger, but making sure we are even starting these conversations, having these conversations. This morning, Dr. Erum, he had a conversation about bias in the United States, and he said something to me that was just so profound. He was like, we talk about racist and not racist. Oh, I'm not racist, or I'm racist, and that's a contrast that we kind of stand by and live by, where he said the contrast should be, I'm racist or anti-racist. So either you're racist or you're working against racism is kind of what I took from it. And I think for me in this space, either you are actively looking to get your message to diverse populations, or you're not, right? There's no, I'm not doing anything, like let's put my hands up. I think what I love about everything that you're saying is you are active in this space and making sure these populations are receiving the message. In terms of messenger, and this is for the group at large, so anybody wants to take this, we talk about why it's important to have the right messenger send out our messages of these life-saving treatments. What do you think that root cause stems from?
I can start a bit here. So, one of the biggest insights we always have when we dig deeper is around the lack of trust in the healthcare system. And unfortunately, that goes back to very profound moments like the Tuskegee experiments and the Puerto Rican birth control. I mean, there's unfortunate examples from years ago, but when we look back at history, we know that things like that are systemic, and unfortunately, the fact that patients now are not representative is also a result of not having patients in clinical trials. And so that is a big initiative that I think I know Rodney and I've talked a lot about also when we're trying to change the makeup of our organizations and think about that. We really have to start with helping to influence people from where they begin, in their earliest education, exposing them as much as possible. And so then when you think about the earliest part of the patient journey, that really starts with, do we come out and explain data and create outcomes that are representatives of the population? And so one of the things that's I think really pharma is doing to make a big difference is around clinical trials. We actually have a full phase 3 clinical trial that is all non-white individuals. It's called Visible. It's in the dermatology space. And we have really tried to be much more visible about the ways in which we show skin. And how could you ever try to self-diagnose or understand if you believe you have psoriasis if the skin color you're looking at doesn't look like your skin? And so I think there's a number of things we've done. I know last year alone, we submitted 26 different applications to FDA around collaborations on DEI initiatives within clinical trials. So I think it speaks to what you're both talking about, which is we have to be active in this, and we actually have to try to change things that will systemically change the future in addition to the messages we can deliver in the here and now.
Yeah, maybe I can just build on what Cynthia said. And one of the things you'll hear a theme from me. My theme is, we have to be in the room, right? And I'll give you and this is basically not about me, but I'm just using the example because I've been in the room. And 2 clinical trials, I was, first let me give a couple of stats. This is Breast Cancer Awareness Month, and unfortunately, there's two really important stats. One stat is that the death rates from breast cancer are actually decreasing significantly. The American Cancer Society just released some new data that showed it's down probably about 44% over the past 10 years. That is outstanding, really outstanding. And I think that comes from, obviously, education and awareness. More people are paying attention. However, the other stat is, unfortunately, women of color, not just Black, but Hispanic and Asian, are still dying at a higher rate than others. We are actually diagnosed less, but dying at a higher rate. And so one of the things I think about, and again, goes back to sitting in the room. I'm sitting in the room. We're talking about clinical trials for one of our brands for breast cancer in particular. And I'm in with a lot of research and development people. I'm the only sort of commercial person in the room. And I'm just looking at the data. I'm just, they're talking, and I'm just like, where are we enrolling people, right? And I'm looking, and we're enrolling people all over the world. And I just raise my hand. I say, hey, hold on. I don't see, we have all these countries in here. Obviously, we have the U.S., but there's nobody being enrolled in South Africa or in Africa in general, right? And then they say to me, well, they don't have the infrastructure. And now, that was the wrong thing to say to me, because fortunately, I lived in South Africa for 4 years. And I said, actually, that is incorrect, because I lived there for 4 years. I was actually the country president there. I had a clinical trial team. The infrastructure there is outstanding. We just haven't done the work. And then, of course, they went back and said, okay, we're going to add South Africa to our clinical trial enrollment. So it's not, and of course, the majority of the people they're going to enroll there are going to be people that look like us. But it's those type of conversations. It's like being in the room, and you got to speak up. You can't just be in the room. You got to speak up and just have the conversation to change things as well. And I think those are ways that we will have to, when you're in that room, I would just encourage you, whatever it's for, but for healthcare, in order for us to close the gap, we got to speak up. We got to make sure we are being included in those clinical trials, because when these drugs come out, we want to make sure that the outcomes are just as good for people of color as they are for everyone else.
Absolutely, thank you. Michelle, for you, so in terms of the distrust, there's a ton of distrust, making sure we get the information, making sure we start at the clinical trial level, making sure as early as possible. What are you doing, or what do you see happening in terms of caregiver and bringing caregivers into the mix, into the conversation, and making sure we're reaching them?
Yeah, again, I think it's connected to so many of the things we've said, but the right messenger this time being the caregiver. Think about who you trust to get your information from. First person I'm calling, my husband, my sister, my line sister, my cousin, right? You're thinking about
Sales rep, who's your cousin.
Exactly. Exactly, right. Who you think is a doctor, but it's not. But the caregivers in our spaces, especially for our elderly family members, right? Our elderly aging population, they're very mistrustful of the system. And so we are their caregivers. I'm sure many of us in here are taking care of our aging parents even. I know I am. And so the caregivers play a really big part. So sometimes it's not just about getting right to the patient who's suffering or living with a specific disorder or disease, but also talking to the caregiver, the person who's making the doctor appointments, the person who's picking up the prescriptions, the person who's going to come to the visit with a list of questions to make sure that everyone in the room is on the same page. So the caregivers play a really big part, even for those of us with children. For children that are living with different diseases as well, there is no one more motivated than a parent with a child who needs help, right? Or who needs medication, or who needs care that they're not getting at the optimal level. There is no one more motivated. And so you have to talk to that caregiver, and they should really be a partner in all the discussions and the decisions, so we can make sure that patients get the right care that they deserve. So when we think about our marketing efforts and our campaigns, and whether it's digital or wherever we're meeting the patients where they are, we have to remember the caregivers must be a part of that journey, because the patient journey, they're usually hand in hand with someone else, and so that person must be brought into the conversation early and often.
Anybody?
Yeah, a quick funny story. This is what was probably 2 weeks ago or so. And obviously, Cynthia and I are good friends, but I respect her tremendously as a marketer. And I was in a meeting with my marketing team, and we were talking about how do we reach these caregivers. And I was like, shucks, when I worked with Cynthia, she did this thing. It was like the fly on the wall. Like I shot you a quick text. I'm like, Cynthia, what was that thing we did over at J&J? And then she gave me the insight. Because what I was trying to get to is we do so much research around the patient. I wanted to hear what was happening in the doctor's office with the caregiver. Because I know I'll speak again for myself. I know for me, sometimes it's my wife really speaking up for me, right? Having that conversation. So especially with prostate cancer, the man goes into the room, the doctor says, how you feeling? He's like, oh, all's good. Medication's working well. And then it's the spouse, the wife saying, hold on, no, he's tired all the time. He's actually skipping medication because it's giving him, diarrhea or something. Like, they're the ones telling the truth, right? And that's the insight that we need as marketers, so we can develop campaigns to help those patients to get through those challenges better. So it's good to go after understand the patient, but the caregiver is so critical to our marketing efforts in terms of having real good outcomes at the end of the day.
Absolutely. And as you're talking about that, something struck me from yesterday in one of the conversations. Yesterday, one of the panelists on this stage actually, the conversation was, what if Mad Men were black women? Obviously, I spin on the show Mad Men, and one of the ladies on the panel said, what was it now? I just had it in the slip of my mind. I'll remember in a bit, I'll bring it back. Oh no, she said, the role of black women, especially black moms, are that of CEO and assistant all at the same time. And I thought about that, and at that moment, thought of my wife, where it's like, hey, she keeps the house moving, whether it's an assistant today or running things tomorrow or at work. So it's just interesting to see, especially in the black community, the female being kind of that caregiver across for the entire family, but also in general, just us as caregivers. And one thing I want to make sure, I don't want to take for granted everybody in this room is in healthcare, but make sure you advocate for yourself and advocate for your loved ones. It's extremely important. As Michelle was talking about earlier, for the vast majority of us, we are probably the ones in our family that everyone calls on when something happens, right? And so when we talk about healthcare, it is up to us in many cases to make sure our families are informed, and up to us as healthcare professionals to make sure you have the message, you have the information you need. We're transparent with the data that we're providing you. We're letting you know about some of these statistics that we have that are disproportionately affecting our communities and getting that into your hands. So get off my soapbox there for a bit and move on. And so for y'all, you guys you're developing all these life-saving drugs. We're talking about getting them in the hands of the patients and the caregivers. What is the role of agencies and media companies and agencies that are involved in healthcare marketing to help engage these audiences?
Yeah, I could take a stab. So first, let me even just say this, because I'm not sure, if you're not in the healthcare industry, you might not be aware of the constraints of which we operate in, right? We can't freely just say, take my drugs and make you feel amazing, and we can't say it how we want to say it, where we want to say it, why we want to say it. There's a lot of regulations and rules in the box that we have to play in for the benefit of the patient, to be honest, right? The FDA gives us guidance to ensure we're saying things that are focused on the features and benefits and how it works, but also the safety aspects. So I say that to say we can't just come out and explicitly just freely give information, but we really rely on the advertising agencies to help us think creatively within that box. So what can we say in a way that is motivating, it's encouraging, it's clear, it's compelling, and it's going to help a patient then have a better conversation with their appropriate physician, right? So the agencies are really a thought partner for us. We are so close to things sometimes, and then we'll call our agencies in, and we'll problem solve together. And that's where the creativity comes from, to bring things to life. We need these agency teams to help us think above and beyond and see the things that we can't see, but also help us learn from other companies. If I'm in my tunnel vision of whether it was Pfizer or Regeneron, what we do here, I'd love to know what's happening at J&J, what's happening at Novartis. What are the learnings, not stealing their IP, but what have they done that's been really interesting and unique that we can then tailor to our medication and to our patient population? So those teams really become thought partners, and then hopefully together we make magic, all in service of educating patients, diverse populations, and getting them what they need when they need it.
Yeah, I'll build on that because I think interesting enough about the caregiver and also the agencies, one of the things that has really been valuable for us is also partnering with agencies that are going to represent the audience that we're trying to get to. So like, I gotta give a shout out to Hero and to Joe Anthony because we were
Big
in
shout
a
out to
room
Hero.
talking about, building
There we
our,
go.
yeah, I can't see through there because it's so incredibly
So
blinding.
bright.
I'm not gonna lie, I can only see the front row, but all of you beautiful people, I'm sure that's Sabrina, somebody's out there. But we were in the room building what is now the Talk That Talk campaign, which is a campaign that is specifically focused on Black men and trying to ignite and normalize the conversation around getting screened and checking on yourself. And we were in the room, and I remember having this conversation, and Joe said to us, hang on a second. The conversation you're trying to talk about, you're missing something important. The person having the conversation is the caregiver. And we talked about this whole idea that the talk that happens, that talk that you have, is sometimes like the son saying to his dad, Dad, you got to do this. You got to go have, and how can we use that conversation differently? And we didn't have that representation in the room. And so I would implore all of you that work in healthcare, and if you work in a pharma company, I want you to ask your agency what representation they have on their team that represents the audiences that we are trying to reach and we need to serve. Because if they are not in the effort that we are, and I feel very proud that I think we are trying to make strides, right, so that our employees represent our audiences, but also ask your agency to bring you a team that's diverse.
Absolutely.
This is probably a more selfish question for myself, coming from an agency for y'all having you amazing minds and for a moment. So what as agencies, whether it be media, creative, what would be on your wish list? If we can bring you one or two things to help reach these audiences that either we're not bringing you enough of, we have not at all, what would that be in order to kind of solve the need for y'all in reaching these audiences?
Yeah, I'm happy to maybe just, and I think Cynthia just talked about you got to have an agency. So and you and I talked about as soon as I walked into the room today and I saw you in the lounge, I was saying, the challenge that I have with agencies is I could be on and I remember, today, back in the day, like going into a room and agencies are doing their pitches, and we used to always show up in this big conference room and there would be no diversity. It'd be like 15, 20 people in the room from the agency. And they're coming through, right? One agency after the other, everybody's doing their pitches. And zero diversity, like I could see 3 different teams, 3 different organizations, and no diversity. So partly and I think the agencies are trying to do a better job today than they were before, hiring diverse people. And one thing I said was, Egg, I said to you is, I'm not saying to the agent, and I've been having this conversation, like, why don't you guys start out with some young people? Like, get them in early. Like, go recruit. Go to the HBCUs and start recruiting at these, at these schools and trying to get our young people in early, and then they grow up and they could be sitting in the room helping to do the pitch or helping, in terms of these decisions. So I think that's one really important strategy is, looking for agencies that have diversity. And they don't have to always be the decision maker, but you want to see that they're putting efforts into, building up sort of that new muscle that they may not have had in the past as well.
And one of the things, and if people don't know, she was talking about Joe Anthony. Hero Media is one of the Black-owned agencies, specifically in the healthcare space, that has really been at the forefront of pushing this narrative forward and pushing inclusive media. And so I think for me as a media company and bringing opportunities to y'all, partners like that, Hero Media, Group Black, MD Newsline, that we've been able to find and has done an amazing job over the past 4 or 5 years, has really been instrumental in making sure we can.
Hey, one other thing I will mention, because I was talking to Davo last night, who's one of the founders as well, and he said something that was really profound from us working with agencies. He said sometimes in pharma, you guys think we come to you and pitch, a small audience. He said you have to sort of open your eyes and realize while the audience size might be small, the impact might be huge. And sometimes we miss that, to be quite honest. We miss that. And we have to really take the time to sort of get under it a little bit more instead of just looking at it on the surface.
Yeah, if I can. So to answer the question on the wish list, and to that point, what could be helpful is because we're also, I feel like when when you have those advocates in a pharma company to try to do more with diverse populations, we live and breathe off of data, right? And so if the agencies can help us tell those stories so we can then support the work in diverse populations and support campaigns specifically to reach the communities that are forgotten sometimes or misunderstood, we need that fodder, really, to just kind of say, look, this worked here, this worked there, this is the campaign they did, and here's the reaction they got from the market, and then that's what drove business here, because it still is a business at the end of the day. And so if the agencies could really help us build a stronger business case, then we can convince our own leadership within the pharma companies to work with more diverse agencies, to work with more campaigns and marketing pieces in diverse communities. Because I feel like we have to work together in order to sell the dream, honestly. And one person in the room saying, why can't we do more? Who's the right messenger? Asking those questions, that's not enough. We need that paired with data, paired with results. So I would love that as part of the wish list. I do want to give a shout out to Hero also, because I was introduced to Hero. We did an awesome campaign in the breast cancer space, and I was working on iBrands, and the Hero team and Joe and his crew really came in and just helped us to think completely different. We were looking at the picture framed this way, and they turned the phone for us, right? Like they reframed the way we were supposed to talk to this stage 4 metastatic breast cancer community. And that's what I loved about that team. So that's just a challenge to us all. Ask the tough questions, create that positive tension, and sometimes just reframe what you're doing. And then hopefully that'll help us get to the right people through the right messenger, asking the right questions so they can get the benefit.
Absolutely. What is the role of, I'm sure we probably have a few content creators in the room, what is the role in terms of getting the message? I know we talked earlier about kind of the messenger, but what is the role of content creators and influencers in healthcare, and how are you currently using them, if at all?
Yeah, I mean, we've done a lot more recently than we have in the past. So I mean, we have spokespeople that we're very proud to work with. And Rodney mentioned Shannon Sharp was in attendance at dinner last night, and so we've done some partnerships there, which speaks to the role of the messenger and getting to the person that's going to then activate their community, their podcast, their online community. But I think also finding ways to reach out into those whose voice will carry more than yours within those communities and those influencers because of why they resonate. And so in addition to maybe the influencer, we've also really worked with patient advocates, and the role of advocacy can be incredible. And there's many advocacy organizations that have disproportionately focused on bridging healthcare inequities. So we've done a lot with Zero prostate cancer and some of the other initiatives there, but what they really help to do, again, is get local to really connect with people where they are, where the trust is built already. I think that's the biggest barrier we have as pharma, is beyond the fact that the trust is not there in the healthcare system at large. Sometimes pharma, as a part of that healthcare system, doesn't always have the perceived best interest of the patient. And so if they can see themselves in that individual, and when Shannon Sharp tells his story is about the fact that he got diagnosed young. The only reason he got diagnosed young is because he screened, because he knew that he had a history. And so, we have one other advocate we've worked with in lung cancer, Chris Draft, who's also a former NFL player, who his what was girlfriend and then wife was diagnosed, unfortunately, with stage 4 metastatic non-small cell lung cancer and did not win her battle. And what he says is, if you believe we need to do something, then you need to get loud. And sometimes being loud is not going to be heard unless it's somebody that they trust that they're hearing it from. So we've seen, I think I've learned a lot as a marketer about the ways in which we can understand best how to sort of get the message out well beyond what we can say.
I think, Cynthia, you hit the nail on the head in terms of that voice. Maybe the thing that I can add to this conversation is just to say, I think a lot about how do we get more diversity in healthcare, and that's really a big thing that I'm trying to play a large role. Novartis, we have a program called Beacon of Hope, and it's a partnership with Novartis Foundation and the 26 HBCUs. And what it's all about is trying to educate, well, let me say one part of what's about that's relative is we're trying to educate young people to move into the field of healthcare. Because I think, today we are where we are, but we got to think about the future as well. And the way we get there is by getting, your kids, your nephews, your nieces into these spaces and growing them up so they can be those future doctors that's having a conversation. They can be the anesthesiologist, the oncologist, the primary care doctor. They can be the healthcare executive. They can be the person that's in the room helping to really influence the conversation. And I think that's just a groundswell that we all have to play a role in, is trying to help. Someone said, and you guys, I'm not going to say anything profound, but every day is actually really good until something happens to your health, right? The first day something happens to your health, you're like, oh, shuck, it will stop you in your tracks. And so we think about all these things that we can do, but the most important thing, it's not about your wealth, it is about your health. And so let's get more of our community into this field to have an impact so people are living longer with a better quality of life at the end of the day.
I definitely agree with that. I think the pipeline of who's next, right? So sure, we can do things to advocate now for diverse communities, to try to diversify the work that we're doing today. But when I think about I have 2 young children, right? And I think about who's going to be their doctor later, or what field are they going to get into? Some people think healthcare is just doctors and nurses, and there's so much more, right? So whether it's from the marketing side or from the agency side, or there's just so many pieces. I just feel like the whole healthcare space is a little bit of Oz. Like, people don't really know what happens behind the door. So as much as we can kind of break that open and connect the dots for the youth and the pipeline to come well behind us, I think that will be really the momentum we need to change the space. And so when we try to build these business cases on why we need to do more, it'll be no-brainers, because the right people will be in the room making these decisions a part of the conversations. So feeding in that pipeline, all the STEM programs we see now in all the elementary schools, hopefully that will be the seed planted in some brilliant minds for the future tomorrow.
Absolutely. I was going to ask a question about data and measurement and all that, but after those 2 answers, I'm going to skip that one and get right to this last question for each of you to please answer. What do you feel the future holds for marketing to diverse populations in healthcare? Where do you see us in 5, 10, 15 years?
I hope to see not just through the 3 examples I shared to be the ones I had to scour for the internet. I hope there is a plethora of examples of ways we have been able to create avenues to get education to diverse populations. No matter the disease state, no matter the severity, I really hope that we as a healthcare business can partner with the agencies and work together to have examples everywhere, so it's not an anomaly when you see it, but it's expected and accepted, and the messages land, and then it changes behavior. So more examples.
Well, I'll take the glass half full and be positive that if everyone in this room does one thing each day to try to push the envelope, then we will be better than where we were. But I hope I also see that we keep getting deeper. So I'll go back to our roots as what we learned in marketing is you got to keep asking why all the way till you get to an insight or you don't really have an insight. We have to do the same thing in terms of diverse populations, because the one risk we run is also that we end up lumping things back together because we feel, I still need to cut the data in a way where I can get to people in masses. So I'm going to say that everyone who is Asian American Pacific Islander, AAPI, that's one bucket. Well, did you know that there's 52 countries and 800 dialects that make up that group of diverse? We have to get all the way down to the lowest level so that we're actually speaking and connecting with people. And I think that if we all ask one more question, the way you would about anything else, if it was your kid's health or anything else, then maybe we can make it that much better every day.
Yeah, it's hard to follow those comments. Really good. What could I add to the conversation that's not duplicative? I think, one of the things I will say, we're all, we work for pharma, and sometimes pharma doesn't get a very good rap. But I would say in this environment we are in today, and each of you see it in terms of every time you look at the Wall Street Journal, you look on the news, somebody has cut their diversity department, right? Like DEI is under attack and it's sort of being deprioritized across the board. And I could say, you know, I could speak for pharma on this, you know, all our companies, we're actually doubling down. You know, we're not pulling back. We're doubling down. And, you know, I think what we need to understand is we need to understand the various communities more, because what we can do in terms of having an impact can be bigger. And I'm just proud that we're doubling down in this space and continuing to invest more money in marketing campaigns for diverse populations, trying to understand the patient journey, caregivers, and really looking at outcomes and making sure that we're included in clinical trials at a high level, not just one or two, but at a significant level. So the treatments that we develop over time really do make a big difference in our community.
Yeah, I 100% agree and can't agree with you more. I think being in the position that I'm able to sit in, where as a holding company we have a myriad of various pharma brands under our portfolio, and I have been lucky enough to lead our Inclusive Media Center of Excellence, really focused on bringing this across all of our brands. This conversation is happening more and more at scale, and whereas 2 years ago we were bringing these to the teams that weren't bringing it to us, I have leaders like this from every organization asking for it and really just asking us to help them along. So for me, I think the future is extremely bright. We have conversations like this continuing to happen, various conferences. This is always happening. So for me, seeing leaders pushing it, being at the forefront of it is extremely exciting. So I'm very excited to see what the next 5 to 10 year holds for us.
Same.
And that's what we have for you.